We could mention, I think it's a fun little bit that Godsmack is the name of the song and also launched the name of a band.
And the band denies that that's the case.
Do they really?
Oh, do you mean to tell me Alice in Chains, which is a wildly popular, successful, and profitable band, came up with a song called Godsmack, and you just happened to capitalize upon that kind of association?
Just a little parallel thinking, that's all.
Oh, is that what's going on?
You know?
You sure about that, Godsmack? You sure about that? That's why?
Hello, welcome back. It's week 75 on Out on That Line. I'm Geoff with my co-host Alex. Alex, how you doing this week?
Geoff, I'm shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds right now because I'm just so goddamn excited for what we've got planned today. This is not a new album. It's a look back at a dear favorite of both of ours. I cannot wait to talk about this week's selection. Geoff, tell the people what they've won.
Oh, I would love to. So, we did Metal Monday last week, and that was a lot of fun. Well, I think we had fun 5 out of the 6 songs.
Yes,
one of
I would
them
endorse
is just brutal, still love it. But we just couldn't dam that river. You know, we're a couple of sick men, really love our metal. And we woke up this morning and we sat down in our angry chairs and we said, should we do an episode about one album? Would we do one episode about one album? And the answer is yes. And the album is Dirt by Alice in Chains, one of the darkest, dreariest, most incredible albums out of the Seattle scene in the early 90s. And yes, I'm excited about this one.
It's I'm feeling goofier than the pet raccoon right now, I'll tell you what. Seriously, this is such an incredible album for so many reasons that we'll get into. A fun story I have about it to kick us off, I guess, is I remember the first time I realized you and I both knew this album intimately and fucking loved the shit out of this album. And it was, we were planning moving to Austin. So you were like, come over, we'll do some dinner and we'll talk some strategy. So for dinner, what does Geoff make? He made some delicious barbecue ribs. He baked them up in the oven. We put some Sweet Baby Ray's on that. Got some steamed broccoli.
Sauce is the boss, baby.
That sauce is the motherfucking boss. Just ask Mark Zuckerberg. But yeah, we enjoyed a nice succulent rib meal. And I remember you were like, I'm going to put some music on. I said, yeah, go for it. I'm going to put on a wild card. And I was like, yeah, fuck it. Surprise me. And you put on Dirt. I've never popped so hard in my life for musical kismet like that. It was a great moment.
It was a wonderful moment. And I think we listened to this album a lot in that year that you lived down here in Texas. I mean, we listened to this one a bunch. This one and Purple Rain and Sturgill Simpson, Sailor's Guide to Earth. I feel like we got heavy rotation down here in Texas. And this album, I mean, I don't know. There are albums that we've related to less, but the kind of the severe drug addiction that this album, I mean, that's basically what this whole thing is about, is just broken relationships, the inability to, grow out of your own pain, and just severe drug addiction, which is kind of the catalyst and the fuel for all of it. For all of the things that are making your life go horribly, they are described in harrowing detail on this album. And I think that's why it is so good and looked upon as such a classic, because everybody knows what happened to Lane Staley.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what eventually happened to him. And this album, there's so much defiance about his own situation, but yet there's the acceptance as well. You can tell when he's got those like really sober moments where that acceptance is happening, and then those really high moments where that defiance is happening. And I think it's expressed so clearly in such a raw way throughout this album that I don't know if emotionally there's a better album out there as far as expressing exactly what it's supposed to be about and making you feel every bit of it right along with it.
So I want to ask you, is this a perfect album?
Yes, I think it is. I think for me, because you may not like grunge, and if you don't, then this album is not going to be an album that you enjoy. Um, but if you like the likes of Nirvana, Pearl Jam, even back like the early Foo Fighters, if you like that style of music, this is that style of music. And I think when you have an album like this, and it's an hour long, it doesn't feel like it when you're listening to it, because it does feel like it goes by very quickly.
Yeah, totally.
Because some of the songs are so quick. I mean, Them Bones, when it starts out, it's like, what, a 2.5 minute song? I mean, it's like it starts and it's over. And then Damn That River gets a little bit longer, but then Rain When I Die has that weird, like, fades out and then fades back in for a little bit. It just like throws you so many curveballs right off the bat in this album. You get an experience of like everything that Alice in Chains is Them Bones. You're more like hard driving kind of metal music. Rain When I Die, heavy on that wah pedal, just the kind of real heavy, deep breakdowns that they become known for. And just Lane Staley all over every bit of it with the most haunting vocals. I think that I don't know any more vocals that are more haunting than this. Maybe Kurt Cobain, like the Unplugged on MTV. Maybe.
Yep, I'd put that up there. And this is a perfect album, and this is Alice in Chains' masterpiece. I think that for as dark as all the subject matter is, and as heavy as the music is, there is like a real sense of like there's this strange optimism and playfulness. Like they weren't weighed down by the thing. It was an unburdening. The album was an unburdening. It wasn't putting all of this on you. It was them getting rid of it. And they've said as much. Jerry Cantrell was like, it was our catharsis. We come off the road. We have all of these demons. We exercise them with the music, and that's what you listen to. But we don't want to make it a completely miserable experience, which is why they take these weird chances with their like technically excellent music. And the reason that they can do so much weird shit is because they were the first ones to do this kind of thing. Grunge is like a very dark, kind of existentially depressed genre. Heavy metal has more of a sense of like anger and defiance to it. And somewhere right in the middle, the bastard stepchild of grunge and heavy metal, that missing link is Alice in Chains. It bridged the gap for generations of musicians to find a sound like that, because it is grunge, it is metal, and it's neither, and it's both, and it never runs out of ways to surprise you. That's why I think it's perfect. To this day, listening to it, I pick up on a new thing every time. It's perfect.
Yes. Just the power of, and I think specifically of like Rain When I Die, when they're going through the breakdown and you just hear Lane Staley goes his, yeah, like the way he can just like punctuate a breakdown like that is wild. It's such a unique voice. Because grunge produced a lot of like classically great rock and roll voices. It was Eddie Vedder.
Yep.
Chris Cornell.
Yeah.
I mean, Kurt Cobain. I mean, think of like the names on that list as far as where they rank, and not just like grunge music, but just like rock and metal in general. Chris Cornell is looked at as one of the greatest ever. And Lane Staley to me is more interesting. And for that reason, like is better to me, because who else sounds like Lane Staley?
Right.
Nobody. Chris Cornell was a very classically trained, talented singer that could do a ton with his voice. Whatever you wanted him to sing, he could sing it. But I feel like the way that Lane Staley sang it and used his voice made him the best singer of that generation, and just of all time. I mean, nobody sounds like Lane Staley. You know that immediately when you hear it.
I think that's the thing, is it's like James Bond, right? Everyone has to acknowledge, you have to acknowledge Sean Connery, and then you're allowed a personal favorite after that. I think that's where it goes with Chris Cornell. I think Chris Cornell is the pinnacle. I can't argue with that, but I'm a Lane Staley guy on a personal level. Chris Cornell's voice cuts like a Ginsu knife. It's just sharp. It's got a beautiful tang to it. It's fucking awesome. Like you said, it's more classical. Lane Staley can hit those highs, but they sound completely different because he's the equivalent of like the guy who's trying to like the drunk guy who's trying to stick his keys in the lock and keeps missing. His voice has this always riding the edge kind of wobble to it that makes it feel so much more real. So on like Rooster, it like he can rip it up in that chorus. But there are these moments where he's just kind of down and it's a little more jittery like this. The way that he can manipulate those two extremes and everything in between, it sounds exactly like it needs to sound, like it should. In your bones, you know, this is the way the song is meant to be sang. This is the technique or lack thereof that needed to be used. His voice is interesting. It's raw. It's got a bunch of like flaws and strengths to it. It is damn near impossible to beat. Personal vocalist hero of mine. I can never sound like him, but the way that you believe everything he says, you believe every single syllable of the emotion that he's conveying, you're feeling it with him. That is a fucking magic trick that few can pull off, and that's why I'm a Lane Staley guy.
Yes. And I feel like I want to get some like Alice in Chains kind of basics out of the way here. So just going to run through the first little part of the Wikipedia here just to kind of give everybody the overview. So Alice in Chains is an American rock band from Seattle, Washington, of course, formed in 1987, great year, by guitarist and vocalist Jerry Cantrell and drummer Sean Kinney, who later recruited bassist Mike Starr. Got an interesting thing to talk about with him as well, and lead vocalist Lane Staley. Starr was replaced by Mike Inez in 1993. William Duvall joined the band in 2006 as co-lead vocalist and rhythm guitarist, replacing Staley, who died in 2002. The Staley's previous group was a glam metal band called Alice in Chains. So sometimes if you're looking for Alice in Chains and you go down the rabbit hole deep enough on YouTube, you end up with some like bootleg ass recordings of that first band that sounds nothing like the Alice in Chains that we all know and love. So keep your eye out for that.
Some glam metal shit.
Yeah. So interesting thing about Mike Starr is obviously he left the group after this album got recorded. So he was, you know, everybody talks about Lane Staley's drug addiction. Like Mike Starr, if anything, was worse. He just chose, I think, a lot of more uppers than Lane Staley did. So him being more active, I think it was looked at as less of an issue. But he left the band and I think was out pretty much indefinitely, was on the Celebrity Rehab show, that Dr. Drew show, was on that. I think got like clean enough. I get, you know, it seemed to help him, but then he OD'd with his dad in a van together.
Jesus
like
Christ.
Both fell out right there. Like if that's so, everybody knows like the story, and we'll get into more of the story of Lane Staley and kind of what happened to him as we go along here. But like that's also something that happened to another member of that band. So like it was just pervasive. You know, it seemed like they were the definition of a double-edged sword. You know, as creative and talented as they were, the other side of that coin was the issues that they had to face for having that level of talent. It's almost like there was a balance forced upon them in one way or the other. It was going to be decided.
That's another thing about this album where it's sometimes bigger than itself, because Dirt is a warning, not a glorification. This album, more than anything, without trying heroin for yourself, which neither of us in any way recommend, short of trying it yourself, this is the closest you're going to get to understanding the psychology of an addict, what an addict goes through, the havoc it wreaks on their personal lives. Because the stuff Jerry Cantrell was writing lyrically was more about like relationships. It was the more like personal relationship based stuff. Like Rooster is not a drug song, but most, if not all, of the stuff Lane Staley was writing was dealing with his addiction, and it deals with it in a bunch of different facets. And it really does, by the end of it, make you go, I see why someone would do this. I see why someone would not want you to do it. I understand like what you're like what it can make go away, but what you're trading in the process of trying to run from your demons, and just like what an absolute living hell it is. And yet there's humor to be found in this situation, like gallows humor, pitch black humor. It's just it pulls off an amazing feat that, again, I think cements this is a seminal album, and that bridge between what you're allowed to talk about in metal and what you're allowed to talk about in grunge. Let's give people the full portrait of the kind of stuff that we've endured as products of our environment. It's fucking wild.
Yeah, and I think we can start getting into some of the songs here just to kind of illustrate
Sure.
what we're talking about, because we've touched on it a little bit now, which is like, and you said specifically, it's a warning. There's certainly, I would argue there is a little bit of glorification in this, but you could also look at that as like very tongue in cheek or a sarcastic expression of it, which I think could be very accurate as well. But as you move into it, like Them Bones is just kind of like a really good, solid rock song, but we can listen to the lyrics. I feel so alone, gonna end up a big old pile of them bones. Like, just an acknowledgement of where his life is going if he doesn't make some changes. It's very simple. Each verse and line is like, it's 2 lines and that's it. And it's just a great way to start the album, because it starts out with him screaming. It's just like, and into this guitar riff. And it's just like, that's the way the album starts. Like, very jarring to have an album start that way. And especially when you like look at the cover of the album, it's just this bleak desert, just this like washed in this like red tint. And then you hear that song to start with, and you're just like, man, this is going to be a dark experience. And it does not let up from there. In fact, Them Bones might be like the happiest song on here, just because it's the least dark. It's not a tough competition to win.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, fucking, I'm looking down the list right now and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. There's one other maybe I would put up with it. I might, despite its name, put Down in a Hole up there, since it was designed by Jerry Cantrell as like this brooding ode to the love of his life. It's definitely the grungiest track on the album, but I don't know. It might not be the most tender. Like you said, it's not a tough competition to win when there's so much excellence at the top with the darkness.
Yeah. This is, I mean, their ability to express darkness, I think they do it in a little healthier way maybe than Paleface did it last week for us.
Perhaps.
Maybe a little bit. Well, we kind of ran through, and we were just going to pick a couple of songs to like zero in and focus on. So I think in order to kind of just like get that discussion going, I think you mentioned Rooster.
Yeah.
Was one of the songs that you wanted to really bring up. So what is it about that one, of an album full of absolute bangers? What brought you to Rooster?
So Rooster was obviously one of the big swinging dicks of the singles that they released off this album. It was a song at one point I was like, Rooster gets overplayed. Like, you can't be doing this to Rooster. You're going to ride Rooster into the ground. And against all odds, it never happened. Despite being totally ubiquitous, I never got sick of it. I thought I would, never did. But why I like this is because it's a nice example of the contrast in this album, because you've got 2 songs that sandwich Rooster, Sick Man and Junkhead, which are dark tales dealing with drugs. Like, Lane Staley wrote the lyrics, Jerry Cantrell wrote the music. So sandwiched in between those is a Jerry Cantrell thing that takes a break from the drug addiction material and just gives us a very human story. This one's about his dad and what his dad went through in Vietnam. And not the specifics, because his dad would never talk about it. But they had a very contentious relationship as a result of the things that the dad experienced and couldn't talk about. So this was kind of how Jerry Cantrell was like, I'm going to make an appeal to my dad and his experience and let him know that he doesn't have to talk about it, but I see him. And he tells a great story about doing that on a night when they opened for Iggy Pop, and his dad was there. Big Oklahoma guy in his boots and his cowboy hat. And at the end of the song, Jerry Cantrell looked to the back, and his dad just held his cowboy hat in the air, and that was all that needed to pass between them. That was all that had to happen between them, and it was like the start of healing between father and son. Pretty fucking amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. This one, I mean, the way that Lane Staley sings in verse 2, sings the line, "Oh God, please won't you help me make it through," is just like, he's like squeezing emotion out of his voice when you hear him do that. Just the way he can kind of like just start with a growl and then just wind his way up into that high note and just hold it there. And you could tell that if he wanted to, he could hold it there for so long. It's just like one of those voices that it seemed like it was going through him rather than from him. I don't know if there's a better way for me to be able to describe it. Maybe you can kind of draw your own way to do it, but I hope you understand what I mean. It seemed like it just like he was channeling something rather than, forming it himself, I guess. Just the way that the wah pedal, like Jerry Cantrell became like very known, a very distinct guitar sound. And this was one of the songs that really pushed that wah pedal sound, and that like detuned guitar sound is like Jerry Cantrell is very well known for that. The way that Lane Staley's vocal melodies match up with the guitar melodies, and then where they differ, the way that interplays is so beautiful on so many songs. And then also, not even to mention Jerry Cantrell's backup vocals. Like the haunting sound that you hear is not just Lane Staley. The reason it's so haunting is because they hit the perfect note and they stay so perfectly on pitch through the whole thing that you hardly notice there's background vocals at all. And that to me is one of the most incredible things about this album, is the talent, just the sheer talent from a band that like was looked at as, oh, they're just a grunge band. It's just what they were able to do with this genre of music still baffles me to this day. I mean, their other albums are great, but like you said earlier, Dirt is a masterpiece.
This is the masterpiece. And that, again, part of their game, their flavor, I'm glad you brought this up, is those harmonies. There is a melodic quality to these songs. It's still heavy as shit lyrically and in terms of the instrumentation, but it's fucking beautiful. And part of it is that melodic element that you're getting from the Staley Cantrell harmonies. They love to go like, I think it's like a major third. They love to do harmonies in a major third. They use them at exactly the right time. Every single one of them is totally memorable. It fleshes that sound out. Sometimes you step back, and I mean, Jerry Cantrell does his share of singing. So, and that's the cool thing too, is Lane Staley and Jerry Cantrell supported each other when they traded off. Jerry's going to sing this one. Lane's here to support him. Lane wrote this one. He quarterbacked this one. He's going to play guitar, and I've got his back. Like, it's a pretty cool fucking thing that those two managed to do in their partnership.
Yeah. They just, I feel like it's the musical blood brothers. When you happen to find them, you hold on to them, because the magic that you can create from that. And it's like the sum is greater than whatever the result is greater than the sum of the parts, or whatever that saying is. Like, that's Alice in Chains, I think, is the perfect example of that. Another fun little fact about Rooster is we have a dog now named Chewy, who we nicknamed the Chewster. And so we'll sing Rooster, but we'll change it to Chewster. We have a lot of fun with that. It's just a great time.
Wow. That's what domestic bliss is like, huh?
Yeah, man, I'm boring as shit now.
Do you take a baby aspirin every night to reduce your risk of heart attack?
I probably should. I just bought a mattress and I'm excited about it. Like, okay. I'm really excited about it.
I can't fault you for that. A new mattress is an exciting thing. I don't care how old you are.
Yeah, I'm pumped. Nice. I'm looking forward to it.
No free advertisements, but what brand was it?
Sealy.
Hell yeah, ride till I die.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, what do you say we talk a little bit about the next song on the album? Junkhead. Yeah. Because when I was talking about the Defiance earlier, this is the song that I think perfectly exemplifies that, because I think there is some tongue in cheek here, but I think he also meant it, because look at the life that Lane Staley was leading. Look at the life they all were leading. In creating this song, they're like, well, we're still here after all the shit we've done. Like, maybe they can't kill us, and I think that's where like part of the Rooster was like, yeah, it was about his dad, but it's also like, I always kind of looked at that, the way that Lane Staley sung that. I was like, I think he sees a little bit of the Rooster in himself as well. That's where that kind of that real defiance comes from. And the chorus in this song, I think, just exemplifies like the bravado that Lane Staley had, and really all of them had, in their ability to do drugs, which they were great at. What's my drug of choice? Well, what have you got? I don't go broke, and I do it a lot. Just like, doesn't matter what drug you have. He's like, I'm just going to do it. If it gets me high, I want it.
That's the scope of this entire thing. Like, that's telling you how in deep he is, talking about like, nothing's better than a dealer who's high, because when you see how fucked up he is, it's an incentive for you to get that fucked up, so you'll buy it. And the thing is, there's like, again, there's no glory in heroin abuse in Lane Staley's mind, but there is something to be gained from the honesty, and he can be tongue-in-cheek about it, because he knows, like, a lot of people are like, well, comedy comes from really fucked up stuff that you need to laugh about, right? And I think we know for sure that this music was sublimating all of of his demons. So you kind of get like verse by verse to see different mindsets on what addiction is like. So the first one's kind of like, a new friend turned me on to an old favorite, is one of the lines. Mm-hmm. That is very like tongue in cheek. But like, the gravity of it comes in towards the end. It's like, you can't understand a user's mind. You judge us, but you have no idea. Like, you would take the hell that comes with this, because your life is hell, and you do heroin to get away from your life. And yes, the irony is heroin's going to destroy your life, but it ain't so bad, because you feel good. Not telling you to do it, but you want to know why I do? It's because it feels this good. My life is this much shit that this is that much worth it. It's a pretty fucking heavy ass thing, and Junkhead fucking sticks the landing.
Yes. And it doesn't seem like it should be a good song lyrically, right? Like, what's my drug of choice? Well, what have you got? There's nothing that like deep or meaningful or anything that you have to really dig into there. It's just like, that's the whole thought process. I think that's what makes this album so good overall, is that if it's a simple thought, they express it. If it's complicated and you can't really understand the emotions that you're trying to express, they still found a way to do it. It doesn't matter what it is. It just seems like everything they tried to do on this album was just, it seems like it was so intentional and perfect in every single way. The way that they go from Rooster straight into this song, where it's like those two really defiant ones back to back, whether they did it on purpose or not. Like, we talk about the album construction, and the album sequencing, putting those two songs back to back is a genius move, because you go right from like this, like, come fight me kind of song, like, oh, they thought they'd kill the Rooster, but I ain't gonna die. And then you get to Junkhead and they're like, I can do whatever drug you have. I've got a ton of money. I don't go broke. I can buy whatever you have. Let's go. And it's just like this whole idea that they're proud of how much they can do, but knowing that it's going to destroy them. It's just wild that they knew that this far in advance.
And that's the thing, is I think we all know what heroin will do to you. But to anyone that gets to the point where they try it and it gets its hooks in them, again, it's that high is, I guess, worth whatever happens to you. It's not ultimately, but in the moment when you feel that good, I'm not sure you really have a choice. The shit rewires your brain. It changes your fucking brain chemistry. That's why you get so sick if you stop doing it. You become dependent on this shit. So it's an acknowledgement of I'm dragging my own self to hell, but I have to have a sense of humor about it. That is one of the crazier tricks that this album pulls. I sent Junkhead to my dad. He has never understood why I love grunge. And I was like, you need to understand the artistry in it. I know you think it sounds like noise, but sit down and really listen to it and read the lyrics while you do. It's really important. If you do one thing for me, do this. And he did it. And to his credit, he came back and he was like, that is one of the most harrowing things I've ever read. Deeply disturbing. And I see the value in it. I see the beauty in it. The music still wasn't for me, but I get what they were doing.
You should play him Paleface.
Oh, God. I want my dad to love me, Geoff. I've earned a lot of credit. Let us have
But
this.
we both know that's never going to happen, so you might as well have fun.
That's fair. Oh, jeez. Well, let's...
You know, I don't know if my dad even knows who Alice in Chains is. I would assume he does, just with the amount of music he's listened to.
Yeah, and I mean, you playing it, too. He's got to have at least, by osmosis, experienced some Alice in Chains.
Maybe he's blocked it out. I don't know. I'll have to check with him. I'll have to see.
Secretly, he's like, Dirt's a good fucking album.
Well, I just saw a fun little fact here. The song Iron Gland, which doesn't get a proper, like, if you look at the vinyl or the CD, it doesn't have an actual, like, title listing or song listing on either of them. It's
Hidden
just
track.
like part of it. Tom Araya from Slayer, guest vocalist for Iron Gland.
Yes.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and I think based on a riff, if I remember correctly, based on a riff that Jerry Cantrell kept doing that just pissed all the guys off, and I think they did it as a goof. It's just a gag.
Yeah, it figures.
I mean, it's even like a fun 43-second fuck around with a guest star.
Yeah.
And that's where you put your guest star, right?
Yeah.
Is in the 43-second fuck around that's not even canon
That
to
was
the album.
that's like when South Park had George Clooney be one of the turkeys.
Yes, exactly.
Thanksgiving episode.
Exactly. Again, that's the fucking sense of humor. Like if they were like, we're doing something really serious and important, and they were up their own asses, they wouldn't put that on the album.
That's true.
This is them not taking themselves too seriously and taking themselves just the right amount of seriously.
Yeah.
Not dismissing what they're doing, not overthinking it. Just, this is the mission, to be as honest as possible. This is one of the most honest albums you'll ever listen to. If you haven't heard this, go fucking listen to it and tell me I'm wrong. You can't, can ya? Because it is legitimately one of the realest, most honest, lyrically, musically. This thing is the fucking genuine article. This is a desert island pick for me.
I think, honestly, it's a top 10 album of all time for me. You know, and I think it's not one I really consider to be that, because I think of albums like Searching for a Former Clarity by Against Me and Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth by Coheed. You know, it's like those couple albums are like ones that I went and discovered. You know, those are like desert island albums for me. But it's like Alice in Chains, like, yeah, I went and discovered it, but it came out long before. Like, I didn't get my grubby little hands on it on release day. You know, I didn't even know it existed till I was probably graduating high school. I didn't even know who Alice in Chains probably was until then. But just for me, I don't know how you get better than this album. I mean, there are albums that I think I like more than this one, but as far as like just how good this album is, I don't know how you get better than that.
It's the peak for me. And speaking as a guy who loves Nirvana too, like, you know, you can argue whether you think Nevermind is a perfect album. Maybe we ought to do that one at some point.
Yeah.
And obviously you have to acknowledge like the role that Nirvana played in like really bringing grunge into the mainstream, because Alice in Chains doing their own thing. But Alice in Chains was the first group out of that Seattle movement to get certified gold. I think it was for, which one was it? I don't think it was this. Let me look.
I think,
got it in
what
my
was their
notes.
first? Was it Facelift or was that?
Yeah.
after?
I think you're right. I think it was Facelift that got them their first one.
Let's see, whatever came out before.
Facelift, first certified gold grunge album. Yep.
I thought so.
And
Yeah,
for
they did.
context, 30 million records sold worldwide, 14 in the US alone, 18 top 10 songs on the Billboard mainstream rock tracks, 5 number 1 hits, and 11 Grammy nominations. Need I go on?
They ain't too shabby.
Not bad.
Ain't too shabby.
Not
I mean,
bad.
they I mean really were. I think if they had remained, if Lane Staley had remained alive longer, past 2003, there was a lot of tours that got set up with like Metallica and Anthrax and Slayer. There was a lot of money that got made by the like kind of legacy metal bands, and Alice in Chains would have fit right in along with that. Imagine Alice in Chains at like Coachella.
I can't picture that. It's
But that's what they would.
image.
It would be they would if they did it. Who knows if they'd actually do it? But they'd headline for sure.
Oh, I mean, if they wound up in that situation, you don't put Alice in Chains in a corner. I'm just trying to imagine Alice in Chains at Coachella. Like I'm trying to imagine the band now.
Can you imagine all the selfies with all the Coachella people? Like, oh, it's Alice in Chains, Coachella 2022, baby.
Batches. Play Sick Man. Although I want to shout out Sick Man now that I brought it up, actually.
Okay.
Because it's Sick Man can refer to dope sickness, but also where it comes from is Lane Staley was just like, I got an idea, Jerry. I want you to write me the heaviest, darkest, most fucked up, sickest tune you can write, like the music. Just write me something fucked. So this is the song, the sickest song, Sick Man. And it's like, again, it's another one of those harrowing tales of drug abuse and like the instincts that you're trying to beat down and smother. And the verses are these like over the top, frenzy, primal. And then it goes into the chorus, which is almost like a carnival waltz. It's got this weird kind of like da 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 da. Like it is kind of like a waltz. It's really fucking strange in the best way. And that what's the difference in like the weird kind of the instinct that Cantrell has to these like minor chords on the guitar. It's a demonic fever dream. The bridge, especially. And that key change out of the bridge gets me every single fucking time, dude. It's like, I'm not trying to be glib when I use this image, but it's like you see the plunger going in on the syringe, and that next dose comes just like Lane Staley just comes out with the whoa, it just comes out of him. God damn it, this song is it mission accomplished with writing like the darkest, sickest song on this album. There are other lyrics I would argue are darker, but this song in and of itself it is Sick Man. It sounds like a sick man.
Yeah, again, that Jerry Cantrell guitar sound. Just that detuned wah pedal just going nuts on it. And I think, before this, like the person most known for the wah pedal was Slash from Guns N' Roses. And like there are some similarities between Guns N' Roses and Alice in Chains, mostly the extracurricular stuff, not so much the music. But the way that you heard a wah pedal with like Slash and with like the hair metal bands and bands like that, they were just like hard rock. And then you heard the wah pedal and how Jerry Cantrell used it. It was just like, man, these guys are seeing music in a way that other people hadn't seen it before. They're seeing ways to put songs together to express these emotions in ways that other people just hadn't done. The same way that Guns N' Roses revolutionized like hard rock when they came out in the late 80s versus like the glam metal that we'd had for years before that. I mean, Guns N' Roses kind of signaled the end for like Poison and Def Leppard and like those kind of bands. And then Nirvana and Alice in Chains signaled the end for bands like Guns N' Roses. It just ushered in this whole new world. And where Nirvana was much more similar in like kind of just aggression and tone to the like metal of the 80s, Alice in Chains just took that sound and like, we're just going to distort the shit out of this. We're going to put this wah pedal on it. We're going to detune these guitars. So like, you're going to hear some things that you were used to hearing that's going to draw you in, but the rest of this is going to blow your mind. In this Sick Man, just the way that the guitar is so quick, these little like triplets or whatever they are, this like quick staccato beat on the guitar during the verses, and then during the chorus it's like you said, this weird carnival waltz, but like a really dark carnival. You know, just where do they come up with that in the time period? Like nothing else had sounded like that. So where did this come from?
It's just out of their fucking brains. It's one of the most like, I see the leap. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm like, the artist is keeping us at an arm's length, or the artist is being too on the nose. You have someone like Kurt Cobain who was great at writing these lyrics that were like, everyone argues like, what is Heart Shaped Box about? Oh, it's about Courtney Love's vagina. Oh no, it doesn't actually mean anything. It's like like Kurt Cobain's lyrics are like a David Lynch film. You kind of get out of it what you bring to it. And that's the beauty of it. And it's great. It's relatable, but it's not super on the nose. And I'm not saying Alice in Chains is on the nose. Sometimes they are, and I'll get to some lyrics like that. But when they do, it's because they need to be. It works. Again, this is a perfect album. So but I see so clearly what was in Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley's heads when they came out with this. This is one of the most musically interesting, complex songs on the album. And you talk about the guitar, that the down tuning and the heavy use of wah. The way that the guitar was recorded, it was played through 3 different amps that to take care of like the low, the mid, and the high, to give it that unique sound. Like what the fuck? You realize like how technical this album was, in addition to like lyrically and stylistically daring. It's an achievement like top to bottom.
Yeah, I can't even imagine where. I mean, I guess that's why I'm doing a podcast about music and not writing albums like dirt, is because my brain cannot fathom how you even come up with this stuff. Like how you go from the sound in the verse to the sound in the chorus in Sick Man. Like how those two things even like could become part of the same song to you. That's why Alice in Chains is who they are and why I am who I am.
And it goes right in, like you say, like they're on that verse, and then it just all of a sudden just ba, ba, da, ba, like we're right into that boop 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 kind of like, doesn't sound like that per se, but it's got that kind of like creepy clown shiver up your spine kind of flavor to it. Like again, if you want this to be an explanation of how you feel, it's emotional catharsis for you, it's a warning signal, it's a cautionary tale, like you have to make that very clear when you pick and choose where you're going to emphasize different aspects of this album. And this is one of the most like make you scared of heroin that the album pulls off.
Yes. And it makes you scared of heroin. If you were considering doing heroin at any point in your life, and at any point in the future, just put this album on, really absorb it, and then make the better decision. And don't do that.
Yeah. Pick up a
don't
good
do
book
that
and read.
Yeah, don't do that. There's one more song, because we're getting down towards where we probably want to cut things off here. But there's one more song that I think to not talk about this one on this album, I think would be a disservice. And the song is Wood. And it's the last song on the album. It was written about Andrew Wood, who was a singer of Mother Love Bone, who was also in that Seattle grunge area, that Seattle grunge like kind of group that was coming up with Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, all these bands. A lot of folks were saying that Andrew Wood was kind of the biggest like rock star of any of the singers of those bands. He was the one that was most ready for like the spotlight in that sort of situation. And I think that's why when he passed away of a heroin overdose, that's what kind of really, he really left a mark on all of those musicians. You watch like a documentary of any of the bands, and Andrew Wood's death is a big part of all of their existences, especially like the Pearl Jam 20 documentary. I forget which of the Nirvana. There was one soaked in bleach, and I forget what the other one was called, but they came out like the same time, very close to each other. One of those had a focus on Andrew Wood's death. I think the Soundgarden documentary had the same thing, so it's like it was a big event. And so Wood is the song about, kind of in honor of Andrew Wood. And I think also the biggest, like most rockin' chorus on the album to me on this one, just the way that it kicks into the flood again, same old trip it was back then, the way he sings, so I made a big mistake, tried to see it once my way. Just the way he sings that chorus is so fucking good. That's why that Lane Staley can do that low, dark, like really melodic stuff, and he can also just be a balls out rock and roll singer.
And I think it reflected in this too is the very like grunge approach that these guys took. Obviously, it's a tribute to one of the like forebears of the Seattle music scene, and one of the first guys in a roster of these guys that we lost pretty young to their vices. Like this was the first one to go. It's kind of like to draw a political parallel, like JFK. What would life have been like? What would the country have been like if JFK had lived? It's the big thing people wonder, right? Better, worse, same? Are certain things fated to happen? It's the same question asked with Andrew Wood. Like, if that guy got the chance to go the places everyone thought he was going to go, what would music look like? He looms so large as a presence in so many different artists' lives. So making this the most like grunge forward song on the album was a great choice. It's a great tribute. Putting it as the last song on the album is a huge honor. And it is also respecting his legacy by admitting what destroyed him and trying to tell you, like Lane Staley does in the outro, please don't do this to yourself. Like this took a special guy from us, and Lane Staley wound up predicting his own fate. But the outro, am I wrong? Have I run too far to get home? Have I gone, left you here alone? Am I wrong? Have I run too far to get home? Have I gone, left you here alone? If I would, could you? So it's basically saying like, can I ever get clean? Can I ever kick this? Am I fucked? Am I at the point where I'm done? I'm there's no hope for me left. Am I gonna die? And am like, please tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that this isn't happening. But then acknowledging that that's what's happening and essentially ending it on that question. Like, if this could happen to me, a guy who's got everything going for him in a sense, like, yes, this is obviously like the music is steeped in pain, but I've got music, which is this good thing. So if I feel the pressure to escape my circumstances, what do you think would happen to you? This could happen to me. Could it happen to you? Would it? And it just ends short on that little punctuation, no fanfare. The song just gets out. It's the perfect way to end this album. It starts with a bang and it ends with a bang. Just blat, bell to bell. Perfect.
Yeah, it is. Again, I think of all in this genre, that time period, I think this is far and away the best album that came out of that. I love Nevermind. I love Nirvana, but to me, Dirt is just so far and away better than anything else anybody else did. I mean, and I love Pearl Jam too. And I think it's better than Versus. I think it's better than 10. I think it's better than anything that they released back in those days. And I think Lane Staley is one of the most singularly talented singers that we've ever had the pleasure of hearing. There's tons of people that are just like good singers. There's a million Jennifer Hudsons. There's a million people that are like that, where it's just like, oh yeah, they got a great voice. There's very few people that have such a unique voice like this, and I think that's something to be really admired that they were able to produce. And like, we can feel lucky that we even got to consume all of this. It's just, for me, I don't know. There's no better album than this. I can talk about like ones that maybe were more important in my life. I could talk about like Born to Run by Springsteen, or the or the Coheed albums, you know, whatever I might say or I like more than this one, I don't know if I really do, because I don't know if I'll ever, when this album comes on, I never turn it off.
No.
You know, and I like for this week, I've heard this album 200 times, 300, who knows how many times in my life, a ton. When I knew we were talking about this album this week, you know what I did? I've listened to it 3 times this week.
Yeah.
Like I needed to. Like I knew every inch of this album. You know, I knew every little bit of it, but I was like, you know what? This album fucking rocks, so if I got to listen to it, I'm going to do it. I did it 3 times.
Well, it shouldn't surprise you, Geoff. I literally listen to it once a day ever since we decided we were going to do it. I'm like, well, I guess I'd better listen to Dirt again.
Yeah.
It is something you look forward to going to. You know, and it's like Elvis Costello or Steely Dan in the sense that, like, I'll ride it hard for a minute, and then I'll go away for a minute. I cycle in and out. Always find my way back to this album. Doesn't matter where I'm at in life, if I'm in a good place, a bad place, I can be depressed, I can be pumped up. The album, I never not want to hear it. It always matches whatever mood I'm in. It's completely versatile. It's important. It's important socially. It's important for what it tries to accomplish as a fucking killer rock and roll album, as a cautionary tale against vice, as pure expression of artistry and pain and even joy. The joy of making music. They always acknowledge that. A celebration of their talent. Something new that's going to bridge the gap between 2 genres of music. No one else, like, it bridged the gap. No one else tried, and no one had to help. This album did all the heavy lifting. Alice in Chains did all the heavy lifting. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they don't get their recognition, they don't get their due. They do. But they're probably not held by most people you talk to in the same stratosphere of esteem as a Nirvana. But Alice in Chains, to me, you don't really have the same prominence. You don't have the same crossover appeal of the Seattle scene if you don't have Alice in Chains and you don't have Dirt.
Yeah.
It's a perfect album.
And if there's any album to get you into Alice in Chains, so if you're out there and you were not familiar, you know, I'm guessing if you listen to this, to the podcast version of our show, like who knows if you watch just the reaction videos and that kind of stuff, you may not be necessarily into Alice in Chains, but if you listen to our full podcast episodes, I would assume that you're at least have a cursory awareness of who Alice in Chains are. And if you don't, Dirt is the album that I suggest that you use to get into them. If not Dirt, then find the Unplugged MTV concert that they put on, because that, if you want to be like moved, that's the one, because you'll see, I mean, because I think it was, when was that? Like 96 or 97 that they did the MTV Unplugged?
It's a good question. Let me look.
Yeah. So the thing I liked about, you know, the MTV Unplugged versus, you know, why I think it might be a good entry point versus a whole album is because you can see the emotions as he's singing. You can see them creating this music. So it gives it a little bit of a different sauce on there, a little bit more spice in there. And what do we got?
1996.
96. Okay. So it was like, that's 4 years after this album. What had they come out with by then? So by 96, they had Facelift, Sap, the EP, same year as Dirt, Jar of Flies, the self-titled Alice in Chains. So they had their four big albums came out, and then they did the MTV Unplugged. So you're getting like all of the most like haunting versions of Alice in Chains. There's a little like Easter egg in the MTV Unplugged, where he's singing, I think it's from Jar of Flies. There's a song on there, but it's about like looking yourself in the mirror and like forcing yourself to dress a certain way to like, but he did it to make fun of the members of Metallica, because they were all like friends with each other because they're all from the same area, because the Metallica members were in the audience. So he like changed the lyric or something to one of the songs to like do a little dig at them. So like that's a fun thing to see in the MTV Unplugged. So like among their peers, Alice in Chains were looked at as one of the greatest bands of all time. You know, of bands like Metallica and Soundgarden and all these groups, Alice in Chains in that genre, in the world of music, were looked at as the leaders, kind of defining what that sound was going to be. Like Metallica didn't really get deep into like the wah pedals until around the same time that grunge music was coming out. So it's like you can tell these influences were just like, there was just all this reverse osmosis back into like the older versions of the music. It was all a really, really cool thing. And that MTV Unplugged, I think, just shows it encompasses so much of what Alice in Chains is, that I think if not Dirt, then do the MTV Unplugged concert as your way in.
I mean, it's rough to watch Lane Staley. He was in pretty rough shape during this, but gives the performance of a lifetime. And I don't say that to praise the things he was doing to himself. I just mean, like, good for him for pushing through and finding his way back to the thing that made him happy, which was pouring his heart out while he was at his lowest. And this was pretty much it for the fellas in Alice in Chains. I mean, Lane Staley couldn't do much more. He just kind of became reclusive, and it's horrible what happened to him. I won't go into the details. Some of them are kind of gruesome. But if you look at, this is an iconic live album. My favorite version of any of the songs is the song "Got Me Wrong" from Sap. The version on this one, fuck, is that good? God damn it, is it good? So yeah, the Alice in Chains Unplugged is a great one too. You really can't go wrong with Alice in Chains. I'll be honest with you, I haven't listened to anything after this. Just wasn't, like, the heart kind of went out of it when Lane Staley died for me. So I just never really bothered to check back.
There's still some good, the stuff that it was when it was just, Jerry Cantrell basically driving the bus. It's decent. I think it's not going to piss you off. Like there's a lot of people that were like, oh, how could he continue on with that name? It's like, well, I mean, it was as much his band the whole time as it was anybody else's, so like if he wanted to keep using the name, then that's his prerogative.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like a ton like the stuff did in the early 90s, but like what band that's existed with all their members that was around in the early 90s and exists now, what band sounds the same anyway as they did back then? So like that also doesn't matter to me.
Right.
I'm just happy that he's still like making music. He came out with another album in 2018, so only like 4 years ago. So it's, under the Alice in Chains moniker. So I think it's something he's continued with, and I thought it was decent. I mean, not as good, obviously not as good as Dirt or like Facelift or the early albums, but what can you do?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll have to check it out. It wasn't like a total opposition to it on any kind of like moral or ethical grounds. It's
just know, like, it's not going to be the same.
Again, like I just miss Lane. I miss him so much. So, I don't know. I feel like we've reached a good ending point here to wrap this up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, make sure that if you enjoyed this one, because I enjoyed this a lot. This was nice. Just I like the episodes that we do where we just like pick an album that we both know we love, because we know we're going to have a good time talking about it. So this was a really fun time. I mean, as dark as this album is, make sure you go check it out. Alice in Chains, Dirt. Make sure that you let us know if there's other classic albums that you want to see this kind of treatment. We're open. The Coheed album just got delayed another month. That was going to be coming out in another month, and now it's going to be another month after that. So we got some space to fill, and we'll find albums to fill it, but we always are open to suggestions. So let us know if there's something that you want to hear, either full album, full podcast episode. You want to hear something for a reaction. You want to see something on the singles videos. You want to see an on the record episode. If you're not getting the idea, we got a lot of ways that we can get this content out to you. So if you let us know what you want to hear, we can find a way to get it out to you. And Alex, is there anything that you have coming up that you want to plug?
You know what? To borrow a line from my co-host on the Skimbo Lounge, no, I have nothing to plug.
You do have something to plug every week, just give us a YouTube video. You got something coming up?
No, I think it's you, isn't it?
No, this one's you, I think, my friend.
Is it?
Yes,
that's right. You did
so.
Lingua last weekend. That's true. Well, then I
Yes.
guess good thing I record a bunch of them at a time and I have something to deploy. So yes, I will have a new reaction video by the
See,
time
look
you
at
hear
that.
this.
Look at that.
I didn't even know it. It's going to be as much of a surprise treat for you guys as it is for me.
Well, let us know what you want to hear. You can do that on the YouTube in that comment section. Make sure you subscribe. You can do that on Instagram at Out on That Line. You can do that on Twitter at Out on That Line 1. You can send us an email outonthatline@gmail.com. Basically, wherever social media exists, we're there and we'll hear you. So let us know what you want to hear. And if there's nothing else, Alex, then until next time.